Hey, this is John with Smoke Eater Guitars. Our mission is to keep your axe playing its best at all times. On this channel, we'll cover some basic setups all the way up to pro level with tools. I'll show you tips, tricks, even some trade secrets. Our mission is to save rock and roll, one guitar at a time.
Hello, everybody. This video is going to be made for Jake. Jake emailed me and asked some questions about nuts. Wanted to know the right way to check to see if if he needed to adjust his string nut. So we're going to go through a couple of things today. I'm going to show you how to check the nut, the quick way to check it, and then the gauge, the accurate way of checking it. So, hey everybody, this is John with Smoke Eater Guitars. We're saving rock and roll one guitar at a time. I want to take a moment to kind of share with you guys what liking and subscribing does for the channel. We do a lot of charity work for new students, for young kids that are trying to learn guitar. A lot of those kids can't afford a real expensive guitar, or even the repairs of a starter guitar. So by you liking and subscribing, it helps us keep those costs down. Do your part. Help save rock and roll one guitar at a time. First things first, we're going to go with the quick way. If you're having some issues with the guitar, maybe it's buzzing, maybe it's not sounding right, you want to just do a real quick assessment of your nut heights. I'm going to show you how to do that. So what we want to do is we want to fret the third fret. You don't have to press really hard down. You just need to get it fretted. And then what you do is just tap with this hand to see if that string is above your first fret. And what you want is just a little bit of movement there. You should be just barely above that fret. So I'm going through and I'm checking each one of these. And if you're high, if your nut is high, you'll be able to tell by just doing this real quick assessment. If your nut is low, you'll be able to tell. If it's high, when you hold this down, it's going to be sitting quite a bit above that first fret. You want, with kind of the naked eye, to be very hard to tell how high it is off that fret. But when you press it and it has some give there, you know you're probably right on. If you press it and you go to check it and it's not moving because it's already fretted against, that string's already touching that fret, you know your nut is too low. So what we're going to do is we are going to show you the accurate way. Now what I use is I use these filler gauges. Now I normally use the ones that I get from Music Nomad because they have it written on here, guitar, classical guitar, bass, where it should be. So if you look at this filler, and I'm trying to get it to where, there we go. You see where it says guitar, low E and A. This should be the gap. The 0.020 should be the gap. What we're going to do, without putting a capo anywhere, without fretting any strings, we're going to simply slide this under the gap. And that string should not have a whole lot of movement against that filler gauge. It should just be resting right at that filler gauge. So that's perfect, dead on. When I do this, I kind of go in at an angle, like a top angle like this, to make sure it's sitting right up against that fret. And those two strings, the E and the A, are perfect. So we're going to go to the next filler gauge where it says D and G. And this is a 0.018 inches or 0.45 millimeters. And what I do on this one is I will slide it in the gap here and then bring it up to the fret. And I'll check, first I'm going to check the D string, and that is right on, maybe just not even a high enough to do any adjustments. I mean, it's right dead on. Then I come from the other end to do the G. And again, that's right on there. I knew this guitar didn't have any nut height issues, but I wanted to show the process. Now here again is another filler gauge. I'm going to try to get it to focus. And this is the B and the high E. There we go. And this is a 0.016 or a 0.4 millimeter. And this is for your B and high E. Coming from that opposite end, I will slide that under. I could probably take that B string down just a tad, but that E is dead on. That B may be just a little high, but not really enough to worry about it. And that's how we check the nut. The two ways we can check the nut string gaps. I have a couple of guitar necks that I keep around just for kind of like practicing and kind of me. They're kind of just props, if you would. So I'm going to grab one of those, bring that over to the workbench, and if we had a gap issue, I'm going to show you how we resolve that gap issue. I'm going to show you a couple of ways to resolve that gap issue. So I'm going to put this guitar up. All right, this neck was found at Goodwill. There was a couple of guitar necks at Goodwill, and I thought, man, that's good practice necks. Man, I can really hone in on addressing fret ends and rounding those frets, trying a couple of different ways of doing some fret corrections. I could use it to, if I had a new product I wanted to try for polishing, I'd have a fret I could try it on. I know it's cheap and I know it's not a good neck. I could tell that. I could tell by the fret ends that it's really not a quality. The nut is plastic. But it actually gives us a prop where I can show you guys a little bit more in detail without hurting any of the guitars that I'm currently working on. So each one of these slots are gauged to the string that you normally put on your guitars. So if I use 42 to 9s, this gap here on my low E string should be cut to a 42, 43, somewhere around there. If I'm using 46 to 9s, which is that is available, 46 to 9, I know I would need to go in and cut that gap just a little bit wider or widen that gap up a little bit. But let's talk about string height. We're going to go with, let's go with the B string. Let's say we went through the gauges and we tested it, and now your B string is, well, we'll talk about too high first. If it's too high and you have a set of nut files like this, sometimes they look like this, sometimes they look like regular files. It's important to have a set of nut files that are the proper gauge. You see this, I have it marked for B, but it's also marked with the gauge, right, in inches. Those are important numbers for me because I know what strings they go on. So if this is too high, what I would want to do is take my gauge and kind of put it in that slot where it naturally falls. And what I like to do is I like to angle it down a little bit. All right, so I just angle it down a little bit, and I'll do about 4 passes. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'll put that string back on there and test it again. Oh, nope, not deep enough. 1, 2, 3, 4. Test it again. Okay, that's perfect. And that's how you kind of set if you need to lower. Now, let's say you don't have a set of these. Do you have an option? Actually, you do. What I've seen works pretty well. It just takes a little bit longer time. Is take an old B string and utilize that B string as a file. So instead of throwing away your old B string, keep you a section of it, and you can put it down in that slot and work it back and forth and kind of get that done. I've also seen where they'll take a filler gauge and wrap a piece of sandpaper on there and just use that sandpaper and filler gauge and go back and forth and get it done that way. So there is an option. You don't have to buy special files, but I will tell you, your life will be a whole lot simpler if you do. So I know I play typically 42 to 9. So I have the 42 to 9 set. What I found is this, and depending on which video you watch, some people say this is wrong, but I will tell you, I've been doing it this way for a while, and it works pretty well for me. I will grab the E file and file my E, and I'll make sure it's nice and filed and ready to go. And then I check my A string, and if that needs to be filed, I will use this same E to file my A string. It gives it a little bit of room in there in case I wanted to switch gauges. And then whenever I get done with the E on the A string, I go to the A on the G, And that'll give me a little bit of room to adjust if I wanted to go from, let's say, if I'm using 9s currently, and let's say I wanted to go up to a 10 or a 11 string. This will allow me to do that. Cutting those are not bad. If you use one size up, is not going to hurt anything. I don't have any issues with it. Some people say, no, that's not the way to do it. Puts more room in there. It doesn't get enough. I will tell you, I kind of learn from experience, not from just listening. I learn from doing. That's always been me. And I can attest to using one size file up on each one of these is not going to hurt anything. In fact, it lets it work a little bit better. But once you're done filing and getting it to the right height, you're not done yet. What I will do, this is a little triangle file, right? And it goes to a point. What I do is I will take this triangle file, and at the side of the nut closest to the tuners, I will go in and just kind of round the end of that slot off just a little bit. What I've found is that if your string is going to bind up in that nut somewhere, it typically binds up right there at the end, especially on like a Gibson style headstock where you have 3 tuners on either side. When those strings go through, they have to make a bend. So whenever you're tuning, you hear a pop. And normally what's happening is that string is getting caught up at the very edge of your nut. So you take one of these triangle files and you just kind of open the edge of that nut up just a little bit, just to kind of round that, so it's not such a sharp turn. It's just a kind of a rounded turn. I'm not doing that to the whole slot, just to this very edge. And that'll save you a whole lot of headache by doing it that way. We just got through cutting the slot. Now, before we move further, let me mention this. On the low E, the A, and the D, they don't cut because you're cutting more material. They don't cut quite as quick. When you move to the G, the B, and the high E, it only takes 1 or 2 strokes and you've cut a lot because you're only cutting a very thin line. You have to be very careful when you're cutting the E, the high E, the B, and the G. You can go too low really quick, but don't panic. There's a way to fix that. So I'm going to show you how to fix that real quick. I've seen this done. I've done it before. I've got guitars that I currently play that have this done. And I will tell you, I'm sorry, I hit the camera because I'm reaching over here for some tape. I will tell you that this works really well. First thing you want to do is tape off around the nut. Then what I'll do is I will use a little bit thicker tape and build kind of a bridge on that nut. So I come and make a kind of a wall on either side of that nut with the tape. And how I do that is I just press this in really tightly against that bottom of that nut, and it kind of builds that wall for me. So if you can see, I'm trying to get to it. You can see how this is kind of standing above the nut. This piece of tape is standing above the nut. That's what you want. You want it to build that little wall there. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I've seen people do this process with and without this wall. It just makes me feel a little bit more comfortable when I have this set up this way, where I have something protecting my guitar a little bit from getting too much stuff on there. Okay, so we get this done. I had mentioned in a couple of other videos, when we're dealing with saddles or even with nuts, there's going to come a point in time that you're going to have to deal with saddles or nut issues or something. And what I find and what I try to do is I have an old medicine bottle. And see that powder at the bottom? That's bone dust. What this is from sanding on acoustic saddles, from doing nut slot, from building nuts. I keep some dust around because with that dust, you can fix this issue. So let me get just something that's I can get a little bit of this dust out with. How about a little flathead screwdriver? That'll give us enough dust. We're going to take some of this dust on the end of this screwdriver and then pour that dust into that crack. And what I try to do on this is I try to flatten put enough dust in there to kind of go level with the top of the nut. Now that I have that done, I can put this, see, it only took just a tiny bit of that dust to do this, right? So having just a little bit of dust like I have, man, that goes a long way. Then what I have is I have some very thin CS glue. If you want to know what CS glue is, it's basically just super glue. Just the chemical term for super glue, I guess, is CS glue. All I'm going to do is take a toothpick and go into my CS glue just to get that tip wet. And then as I hold the toothpick like this, it kind of builds a drip at the end of it. And I put that drip right onto that slot. Trying to get to where you guys see it's forming that drip so it gets to the bottom of the toothbrush or the toothpick. And I just touch that slot. And all I want to do is get enough glue on there to make the surface kind of wet. I don't need to go over the whole bone. I just need to go over that one slot. What happens is that dust will absorb that super glue and basically build you a new slot. Just 2 tiny drops of that is all I did. Once I get that on there, I either do one of 2 things. I take my air dryer or my air blower, just this blower, and I'll just help it dry a little bit. It doesn't have to be on the high speed or anything. It just needs to be on enough to get it a little dry. And what I'm doing is I'm going back and forth to see when that CS glue stops moving. Once that CS glue will stop moving, then I don't need air anymore. I get the activator and give it just a little shot of activator, and that will set that glue. That'll set that glue instantly. Now, once that glue is set, I can take this tape off. Now, I wish to say that all you got to do is start filing at this point. No, you got some other things you need to do before that. All right. So we're going to let that, that's set up nice. Toothpicks are cheap. I actually buy good maple toothpicks. They're not the cheap, just Walmart brand. I can find maple toothpicks that are more of a solid wood. And because I use toothpicks a lot. I use them for filling holes, like these little small holes here. I can use a toothpick to fill that. Tuning peg holes, like back here, all these little holes I could use. Again, with just an old guitar neck like that, I can utilize it to practice with. So, all right, let's see. Yeah, we're dry. All right, so we're going to go and just start scraping the top to make it even again. Now, once we get that nice and shaved, or even again, get all the excess glue off. All right, that'll do for now, because we're going to come back and do a little bit of polish and sanding on this whenever we get the nut slot done too. So now that we got that, all the true excess off, we will, I got one little spot right here I got to get. We will cut that nut slot. So let's cut that nut slot real quick. Remember we said we were going to go, if it's a B, we'll do the G on it just to give it a little extra wiggle room. So I'll grab my G file, right? And I know I'm going to that B. So right now I can't even find the slot because I filled it all. So I have to kind of eyeball it. And then I will start it, Tilt it up a little bit. And once I get it started, I put the string back on, right? And that string will set in that spot, and then I can start testing it. And really, that's all there is to fixing a nut that is too low. It's cut too low. Get a little powder, put it in the slot, let it dry. It doesn't take long because it's super glue. If you have some activator, you can use some activator to kind of help the process go along. We're not done yet. What I will use is the same little nail polishing buffer that I use on the frets just to do the quick clean on the frets. I'll use this to help shape and polish this nut. So we start with 1, then go to 2, go to 3, go to 4, just like you would with the fret. But you're going to use this on the nut itself. The first thing we're going to do is shape that nut. Once I get done with the number 1, I go to the number 2. And then I go to number 3. And then finally number 4. And then once you do all that, when you get done, your nut, especially if it's bone, your nut will look like glass. It really, this little nail polisher does a great job. Now you can see that it's nice and clean. We brought that one back up to where it should be, so we can receive that B string again. Turned out great. So I hope this answers you guys' questions. This is just meant to be a real quick explanation on nuts and just how to adjust them, how to fix them if you cut one too deep. Really not meant to be a long video, just a short one.